Oz is HBO's pioneering gritty prison drama, a hyper-violent and disturbing show chronicling the inmates who live at Oz, in particular the experimental wing known as Emerald City run by Tim McManus. Oz is a groundbreaking show, laying the foundation for later series to come along, such as The Sopranos and The Wire, and begin the second golden age of television. For you and me, this is the... Okay, so maybe it hasn't aged all that great, but for its time it was an innovative show, if for nothing else the sheer violence that was put on screen. The characters of Oz are what's front and center, the stories of guys like Beecher, Saeed and Schillinger. There's a few decent guys in Oz, relatively speaking, but the vast majority of inmates are often psychopathic, depraved and sadistic individuals, preying on those weaker than them, scheming, betraying, torturing, you name it. Even the more gentle souls like Ribedow, a soft old man, you have to remind yourself what these guys are in Oz for in the first place. And this sentiment can be extended to the Oz staff too, very few of which come out unscathed, perhaps the only one being Peter Marie. Even Gloria Nathan betrays her ethics a few times. Warden Glynn seems like a character from The Wire, in that once upon a time he may have been an idealist, but by the end of Oz he has participated in cover-ups and frauds that could have him on the other side of a jail cell. The COs are some of the worst characters in the show, like Clayton Hughes, woefully unfit to be a correctional officer, suffering from demons regarding his father's death at Oz which warped his sense of morality. Need I mention Claire Howell, a serial rapist who has straight up murdered at least one inmate? With that being said, today I wanted to talk a little about one character in Oz I think is pretty underrated, someone who's usually in the background, relatively low-key, but is a stand-up guy. One of the better characters in terms of his nature, in fact perhaps the best character in the show. Of course, Oz has numerous characters who we may feel are underrated in terms of how good they are as people. Even someone like gangster Chucky Pancamo, who I kinda liked. I thought he tended to keep his word, remembered when someone did him a favour, and as long as his drug trade was undisturbed, just carried on with life. But in today's video, the guy I wanted to talk about, to give him his dues, is this guy. Officer Sean Murphy. Murphy first appears in season 3, essentially replacing Diane, as the actress left the show to star in The Sopranos. An Irish American who has known McManus since 6th grade, Murphy is handpicked by Tim as head CO of Emerald City, and after this he is often seen standing in the background or alongside Tim as McManus dispenses his version of justice. Murphy was a character that I noticed more and more as I went through Oz. He appeared on my radar somewhere along the line, and after that I kept an eye on him, and I think he was by far the best CO on the show. Not a lot of competition there admittedly, but also in contention for the best character all round. He's a stand-up guy, he's honest, has integrity, and displays a genuine belief in justice. He seems to be here at Oz for these reasons, not to unleash some kind of sadistic internal projections from past traumas like Hughes, or whatever the hell Howell does what she does. But not only that, good guys could easily get swallowed up in Oz, but Murphy is genuinely good at his job. He's respected by the staff, and he does a better job of commanding the prisoners than pretty much everyone else. He has an authoritative presence about him. The level-headed Murphy always seems to have a quiet, low-key, blue-collar word of wisdom. There's not really much scenes where he's the focal point, where you can easily pinpoint why he's such a good guy. It's little things, little comments he makes. Without real walls, these dinks are just gonna step over the line, he says to McManus about Tim's meditation circle. You play the hand that deals you, he says at one point. Just sensible comments and advice, nothing too poignant or attention-grabbing. You need to keep busy, focus on your job, he says to Ribedow after Ribedow struggles after the passing of his grandson. He could have easily told him to man up and get lost. One thing I noticed is that the way he treats inmates is like a mildly annoyed but understanding parental figure. He cracks the odd sarcastic joke, isn't quick to rush to getting physical, and crucially allows prisoners small victories, which no doubt is a great psychological tool for creating content criminals, as small victories are the only kind of victories inmates will have at Oz and thus are important for them. An example would be the first proper time I noticed him as being different from either the incompetent buffoons or sadistic psychos who were CEOs at Oz, and that's when Beecher doesn't come out of his cell as he's mourning his son. The donut guard says rules is rules, doesn't let it go, and is really being heartless and cruel. This could potentially get ugly, especially with Rebedow saying fuck your rules. But Murphy rushes down the stairs, assesses the situation, and tells the CEO to carry on, allowing Beecher to stay inside and giving the prisoners a victory. He recognizes that Rebedow is right. Why punish Beecher further? Rules and policies aren't everything. I mean, even just seeing what Sean is doing half the time, checking rooms, writing on his clipboard, he's always working, always doing his job. He's one of the few characters with no personal issues, and if he does have them, he sure doesn't bring them to work. He talks to inmates in a cordial fashion as human beings, not on an equal level, but never cruel or dismissive. Like I said, almost like a dad or an uncle. He never seems to ever make a bad suggestion, and it's mentioned that he's a former boxer, but he never chooses to flex his ego, and he lays a few punches on inmates here and there when things get hairy. In fact, he himself gets punched square in the face in one scene. I went back and rewatched a lot of scenes he's in, and he really does come out looking like one of the best characters in Oz, but not one people usually talk about because he isn't front and center in storylines, like say Peter Marie or Gloria. In one of his very first scenes, O'Reilly is getting it from McManus. He asks Tim to handle it his own way, and in private gives Ryan a pass. But not because they're both Irish, well, maybe a bit, nothing heinous in that, but because he says he has a brother and knows what it's like. It's not a terrible thing to do, not as if he's looking the other way on a murder, and it reminds me of a line in The Wire about a detective only being as good as his snitches. Similarly, Murphy here is building a rapport with one of Emerald City's more colourful characters, but he knows the limits. He refuses to coach Cyril in boxing as that would be, as he says, favouritism. When Cudney blocks the TV and agitates the viewers, he tells him to move, and after Cudney refuses, he immediately calls for a lockdown. There's numbers and tensions on both sides. It may have been overkill, but it was a preemptive and informed decision. He breaks up a suspicious meeting in the computer room between Adebisi and the Latinos, showing he's on the ball, and he's a straight talker. Even to his friend Tim, he gives his honest opinion, saying you've slept with almost every woman in Oz when McManus is feeling sorry for himself over a sexual harassment case. But it's he who comes up with the suggestion of going to court and backing himself up with the people who work at Oz. And later he comforts McManus when Tim is really feeling the heat. In Season 3, Episode 8, he is approached by the Russian about O'Reilly, and he could have easily dismissed him and gone back to whatever he was doing. But he goes to the gym to investigate and catches O'Reilly sabotaging the drinks of boxers in the boxing tournament. Now you could say that he should have exposed O'Reilly, but it's interesting that he says if people found out there'd be a riot, which shows he's thinking about the wider implications for the correctional facility, the greater good. After all, what's done is done. O'Reilly getting exposed will cause all sorts of tensions and violence, and instead he tells O'Reilly to stop and that Cyril's next fight has to be fair. He also recognizes that O'Reilly is trying to play the Ireland card with him and calls him out on it. In the premiere of Season 4, when a discussion on solitary confinement is happening, his humane side is shown when he suggests a compromise to Glynn for solitary prisoners, saying that other prisons have allowed controlled exercises. In the second episode of this season, he takes over M City when McManus resigns. And sure, there wasn't a horrendous amount to deal with, but he did a solid job amid racial tensions, and when Busmalis goes missing in this episode, he says something like, "You and Busmalis are joined at the brain," to Rebedow, which shows he knows they are buddies. He keeps an eye on prisoners, he takes an interest, and understands relationships. Do you think Hughes would have been able to tell the relationship between prisoners in his unit? Do you think Howell would even care? In that very scene, he could have grilled Rebedow, but instead wastes no time in proactively searching and finding the tunnel. In the fifth episode, he openly questions Quern's decision to make Adebisi, Pancamo and Morales trustees, and after a back and forth with Quern's, he straight up leaves and moves to another unit. Others would have kept their head down with a new man in charge, maybe even want to impress him, but Murphy knew what Quern's was doing wasn't right. In episode 14, at a time where McManus is thinking about his ego, desperate to win the upcoming basketball game, Sean advises him to call it off, saying it will be bad for all the hacks when Tim loses. It shows he isn't deluded enough to think Tim has a chance of winning, shows he is thinking about the respectability of the COs, and shows that he recognizes the authoritative barrier between CO and inmate is important and must be maintained. 2 episodes later, he proves he has less of an ego than Tim when he changes his mind about the basketball game and says he wants to replace Brass. Really, Tim needs him here, but he acts all petty about it. Sean even starts saying something quite profound, telling McManus, "Isn't that the whole point of this? To show the dinks in here that if a guy puts his mind to something..." But he is then cut off by McManus, who says, "We can't win," showing that again he's thinking about himself and winning, a small-minded mentality compared to what Murphy thought the basketball game could achieve. A season later, when Brass legs it with the money he agreed to split with Ribedow, Murphy condemns Brass as cold, and it's quite shocking that McManus is defending what Brass did, and what follows is probably Murphy's best moment in the show.
To do it to a guy like Ribedow, you know? He's got a dying grandson, not throw him a bone. I mean, that's dead of winter cold. Well, guess that's what $2 million can do to a fella.
No, it wasn't the money. He felt fucked over.
Dave Brass came to Oz and filled out an application. Nobody forced him to do that. Got his leg fucked up. That sucks, but this is a maximum security prison. The poor guy got piss and shit thrown at him. He could get AIDS. That'd be a lot worse than being a goddamn gimp. But you know what? He filled out an application. Every night, I get down on my knees and pray to God I don't get shanked when I come to work. But what if it happens? You gonna blame yourself because you brought me into Oz? Because if you did, you'd be an idiot. I filled out an application.
Of course, the Martinez situation shows Murphy in a more grey light. He leans on the man who cut Brass, trying to get him to say who got him to do the deed. On one hand, he's protecting his own. On the other, he's abusing his position. Helping to cut Morales is the worst thing Murphy does in the show. But on a level, it is commendable. As he is a CO, they have to defend each other. They are on the same team. It's like how races stick together in Oz. So do the COs. And he probably did it out of a sense of honor and justice, as Morales robbed Brass of a good life. And it was under false pretense. Brass lied to him about Martinez confessing, and Murphy shows he has a conscience by doing the difficult thing and giving himself, Brass and Howell up, opening him up to criticism from the staff, McManus included, who sees the cutting as a betrayal. He takes his berating from Tim so well that it actually pisses McManus off with how remorseful he is. But as he tells Howell, telling Glynn was for the truth, for justice, which is a pretty good note to end this video on for Officer Sean Murphy as any. So what do you think of this character, and who do you think is the most underrated character in the show? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.